church's crowd, but no one could see that Cynthia Wesley's dark number was 3. Her prayers and her feelings would shame you and me, and the choirs kept singing of freedom. Young Carol Robinson entered the door, and the number her killers had given was 4. She asked for a blessing, but asked for no more, and the choirs kept singing of freedom.
Well, good morning, all of you who are here. Let's see, I can't tell how, Nanette, can you tell how many folks have arrived, or?
Yes, Peter, we have 9 folks so far.
Okay, so why don't we wait a couple of more minutes before we start. There are 55 of you who are registered, so, but some for particular intensives. I think I know everyone on our initial 9.
Can we, Peter and Bajan, can we keep the slideshow going until we get the critical mass, whatever that is? Yeah.
Sure, why don't we say the critical mass is in 3 minutes, no matter what.
Okay.
Got you.
Mhm.
So whoever can keep it running, okay, sure.
Come round by my side and I'll sing you a song. I'll sing it so softly, it'll do no one wrong. On Birmingham Sunday, the blood ran like a wine, and the choirs kept singing of freedom. That cold autumn morning, no eye saw the sun. And Addie Mae Collins, her number was 1. At an old Baptist church, there was no need to run, and the choirs kept singing of freedom. Now the clouds, they were gray, and the autumn wind blew, and Denise McNair brought the number to 2. The falcon of death was a creature they knew, and the choirs kept singing of freedom. would see that Cynthia Wesley's dark number was 3. Her prayers and her feelings would shame you and me. And the choirs kept singing of freedom. Young Carol Robinson entered the door, and the number her killers had given was 4. She asked for a blessing, but asked for no more. And the choirs kept singing of freedom.
All right. Thank you, Fania, and Bijon for that beautiful reminder of our common suffering and our common humanity. So welcome to everyone who's here to the intensives of this year, of the autumn intensives of the Project for Integrating Spirituality, Law, and Politics. PISLAP, as we call it. PISLAP has over a 20-year history, and our aspiration, we're a group of lawyers, law teachers, law students, and others who are non-lawyers. And our aspiration is to help build a new legal culture that goes beyond the individualism, the social separation, the adversarialness, the mutual antagonism of the existing legal system, with its emphasis on enforcing people's rights against each other, but without any emphasis on the fostering of empathy or compassion or mutual understanding, or healing the long legacy of fear of the other, fear of each other, that all of us were born into in many forms, and which we as human beings must eventually transcend. So our group, our aspiration is certainly to support liberal victories today in the expansion of rights, in defending voting rights, in pursuing social justice within the existing system, and many of us do that in our work. But we also see ourselves as laying the groundwork. Please mute yourself. Thank you. But we also see ourselves as laying the groundwork with many other groups for the creation of a new kind of legal order, where, if you can imagine it, where in the center of town, where the legal buildings are, the judiciary, the legislature, all the organs of government performing law in one form or another, imagine the healing circles that should be and one day will be going on there as people seek to employ the methods that we are trying to develop to create a more loving and caring and compassionate world. We embrace Martin Luther King's dictum, famous statement that justice is love correcting that which revolts against love. So we are trying to help build that at the same time that we militantly defend the struggles of today within today's discourse and framework, both of those things together. So we're doing intensives by Zoom this year because we can't do a conference in person. And we thought we would just take several of our PISLAP members, distinguished people who have created beautiful things in the world, and have them lead 2-hour discussions each day, beginning at 11 a.m. East Coast time. So today's, I'll introduce in a second, today's initial intensive on restorative justice and social change. And then tomorrow, Friday, at the same time, we will have one on bringing a spiritual dimension to law practice, with a focus on the remarkable Georgia Justice Project in Atlanta. And they will be with us to explain what they do. And Saturday, we will do an intensive on spirituality and law from an international perspective, with presentations by Dr. Param, as we call him. His name is Dr. Parameswaran in India, who will be talking about the understanding of spirituality within Indian culture and its impact on the legal system that he aspires to. He's a professor there. And we should have some Indian attendees for that. And also Sylvia Clute in Richmond, Virginia, and her remarkable program of bringing the wisdom of people who have been incarcerated, returning citizens, as she calls them, to the struggle for justice. Then we have a cocktail party on Saturday at what will be 10 a.m. here in California. But many of you are in Europe also, and so it'll be appropriate there in the evening. So orange juice meets Jack Daniels, and then Sunday's off, and Monday we turn to environmental law. Mumta Ito is sort of a European-focused panel that will emphasize the spiritual as integrated with the legal dimension of environmental activism and environmental law, from nature's rights to holistic law. Finally, on Tuesday, the last one is Nanette and Antoinette Del Ruel will be leading a discussion on the uses of transformative mediation in the context of legal services, which should be wonderful also. Legal services, long understood as sort of the last battleground of poor people, and it's always played a very significant role in law in American culture since at least in the last 50 years. And this is about the effort to bring this kind of consciousness that I've been describing to that arena as well. So that's it. Those are the 5 intensives. Sundays off, and every day at 11. We hope to see you here. And now let me introduce our speakers for today on restorative justice and social change. The first speaker, or the first participant or co-participant, is Fania Davis, my friend, and I've done many things with Fania now, speaking in different contexts about our shared aspirations for the kind of transformation, I was putting in my words anyway, that we so often talk about it. Fania is a leading voice on racial and restorative justice. She is a civil rights attorney, author, and public speaker with a PhD in Indigenous Knowledge. The murder of 2 friends in the Birmingham 1963 church bombing led to her lifelong, and that was commemorated in the video at the beginning here today, led to her lifelong commitment to justice. She's the co-founder of Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth and the National Association of Community and Restorative Justice. And her numerous honors include the Maloney Award for Excellence in Youth Restorative Justice and the Ebony POWER 100 Award. The Los Angeles Times rightly named her a new civil rights leader of the 21st century, and among her publications is the Little Book of Race and Restorative Justice. And Fania's made a tremendous contribution in the last, throughout her life, but in the last 20 years that she's made her own transformation to embrace restorative justice, as well as her inherent militant activist struggle for a better world, how she has synthesized those two things. Bijan Justin Barnes has extensively studied as a communications major and Africana Studies minor at San Francisco State University, with associate's degrees in liberal arts for communications and language arts from Citrus College of Southern California. He first began to engage in social justice, community, and nonprofit work with the Youth Mentoring Action Network as a mentee turned youth mentor, supporting predominantly transitional age youth of color under the guidance of his mentors, Dr. Tori Weiston-Serdan and Dr. Gail Serdan. Barnes recently transitioned out of restorative justice for Oakland youth after nearly 5 years serving community as a core staff member, fully committed to uplifting RJ as a healing practice from an anti-racist, anti-biased lens, as enlightened by Indigenous practice. Notably, Barnes introduced RJ's work supporting queer and trans communities of color, highlighting the critical importance of honoring intersectionality when engaging in healing practices. So, with great pleasure, I turn it over to Fania and Bijan to lead us for the rest of the morning. You're muted, Fania, and maybe Nanette. Hold on. There you go. Now we can hear you, Fania, I think.
Okay. Did you want Nanette to say something?
No, I just wanted her to unmute you because I think she's the...
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that. Sorry. So thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much, PICELab. Thank you so much, Nanette. Thank you for the leadership that you have offered over the decades, especially in the founding of the innovative organization, PICELab. I also want to thank you for inviting us, Bijan and me, to be part of this incredible series of autumn intensives. I don't know if we'll make the cocktail party, but I was saying, well, you can have mimosas if you're on the West Coast. I said that in the chat. Thank you all for showing up here today. I know it's different times in different places. It's quite early here on the West Coast, but welcome to this space of deep connection, of deep community. Welcome to the circle of deep talk and deep listening. Welcome to this place of empathy. Welcome to this space of justice and healing. And we aspire to create these kinds of what I call liberated spaces in the restorative justice movement. And so hopefully you'll get a taste of that, and probably a number of you already have had these experiences. Can I get a quick show of hands? How many of you have sat in restorative justice circles? Well, you can, are you able to, maybe you just put it in the chat, yeah, if you are up to that. Yeah, you have, yeah, I have to. So I like to start all of our public gatherings with a land acknowledgement. And of course, post George Floyd, after the public lynching of George Floyd, this has become something of a practice across the country. I come to you from Oakland, Oakland, California, the unceded territory of the Chochenyo Ohlone people. And I know that you're all over the place, you're from all over. And if you'd like, please write into the chat the names of the indigenous inhabitants of your land. And we do this as a way of acknowledging that this is a stolen land, this is a post-genocidal land that we stand on. We have honored the ancestors of the land. Now let us invoke all of the ancestors of all of us present. if you'd like, you can write into the chat a particular ancestor who has inspired your journey in this work of social justice and healing justice. And just to get you moving a little bit, can you unmute yourselves? And can you all unmute yourselves? Yeah, just for one moment. Just call out the name of the ancestor or ancestors that have inspired you in your work of justice and in your work of healing. And we just say it all at one time in this beautiful cacophony of ancestral reverence. Go ahead. Sally B.
Benson
Davis,
Evans,
Frank
Fania
Davis,
Richard Badami.
the four little girls, my friends. All right, great. All right. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bijan, who will go through our objectives and housekeeping matters.
Thank you so much, Fania. I'm so honored to be here in space with you all. My name is Bijan. I use they, he pronouns interchangeably, so you can't go wrong with either one. I'm just going to go over the objectives of today's gathering rather quickly. So through relational, interactive, and cognitive learning approaches, today we will review fundamentals of restorative justice. We will also look at present-day critical issues at the intersections of restorative justice, racial justice, indigeneity, and healing. Right. So with that, we have a couple housekeeping kind of protocols and logistics to go over. Our intention today is very much to have an experimental and interactive training. And so what that means is we want you to be in space with us, right? So much of restorative justice is, and in restorative justice trainings, is not just in simply lecturing, but having an experience, right, with one another, right, where we see each other at our humanity and we're able to interact with one another and learn through one another, right? And so there's a couple of tools we're going to use to help us do that today. The first of which is just going to be all of the wonderful tools that Zoom offers us, right? So with the first thing being the use of the camera. I realize we're in different times and different places. So we want to, with honoring reasons why there may be a myriad of reasons why you cannot cam up, and we understand that with grace. But we want to encourage folks to go ahead and use their cameras. We also want to encourage folks to use the grid view if you can as possible. So you may be using the single view where you just see one person speaking at a time. We want to offer you the opportunity to see everyone in the space, to see other spaces just as we would if we were sitting in a restorative justice circle, right? Another tool we may be using is breakout rooms, but because we have a more intimate setting, which is ideal, we may not use breakout rooms, but it's a possibility we may use breakout rooms to speak with one another and do some processing, perhaps answer some questions with one another. In addition to all of those things, we have a Jamboard. So I'm going to actually drop a link in the chat. Here's the Jamboard link. And I'm just going to go over a few things by sharing my screen so you can see what that actually looks like. It's an opportunity for you to actually be interactive and use a talking piece and circle settings. So I'm sharing my screen. There we go. And so as you all see on your screen, we have a Jamboard with 4 slides at the very top. You see slide 1, which is our centerpiece and values round. So we'll explain this more in depth a little bit later, but what you see is a photo of a centerpiece. Some folks think of this as elements of an altar that sit in the middle of our virtual circle that we're holding here today. And folks will be able to add their personal values to that a little bit later on today. On slide 2, you'll see some guidelines and agreements that we will go over. Essentially respect, presence, confidentiality, rights to pass, taking space and making space, and consensus, which again, we'll go over later in more depth. Next is the parking lot. This is where you'll have an opportunity on the far left-hand corner of the screen. You'll see that there's a sticky note option. It's the 1, 2, 3, 4th option down, where you can actually create a sticky note with a question that may be coming up for you, a burning question that may be coming up for you that you can put in one of the parking lot slots for us to circle back to at some point in during the presentation. there's going to be opportunities for folks to speak aloud and interact with us and ask questions and use the raise hand feature. All those things are wonderful. But if you have a burning question that just wants to come up, you don't want to forget it, please feel free to make use of this parking lot space. And then lastly, we have just some resources that we're going to be using, that we're going to be referencing during our presentation today, that you may want to go back on your own time. This is something that we're going to be sending to Ned and Peter so that it can be emailed to you. But we like things fast and available and ready, so we thought we would go ahead and create this just quick resource sheet for you all to use. And so that's my piece there. Other than that, we just ask folks to mute when not speaking so that everyone else can be, so that we can hear everyone so that we can listen deeply and understand deeply, and just improve our communication while we're in the space together today, honoring each other. And with all of those kind of announcements and housekeeping logistic details out the way, I want to invite folks to just kind of ground themselves and take a deep breath. I know it's just starting our day. I want you to kind of be grounded in your seat. I want you to be really in tune with what's happening in your body. And I just want us to take 1 or 2 deep breaths in through the nose, filling up your lungs, expanding your belly, and out through the mouth. Blowing as if you're blowing out a candle. 1 more time, in through the nose. Out through the mouth. And hopefully that just grounds and centers our space here today. Next, I have some introductions, and I'm gonna pass it right on over to you, Fania.
Thank you. Thank you so much, especially for that breath work. It's always good to help us arrive and be present, fully present. We'll be introducing ourselves to one another. I don't know how many of you know one another or not. I see a couple of people, Sylvia, and that's a beautiful centerpiece Sylvia Glute has there. I know, but I think we're going to do groups, right? For people to introduce themselves. What do you think? Should we introduce ourselves in this large space, which is not, 17, it's manageable? Or should we go into breakout groups of 3, 5 people or so? What do you think? Yeah, anybody?
I'm thinking we can do small groups and maybe
Okay.
For everyone right now, Fania.
Great, that sounds good. Okay, and so you'll be broken down into 3 groups of about 5. Yep. When you get in the groups, you'll have about 7 minutes to just get to know one another a little bit. And we suggest, and this is a suggestion, you can do whatever you want, that you give your name, your pronoun, your organizational affiliation, your role in the world, the work that you do in the world. And then if you were to paint your ideal community, describe the colors, the textures, and the images you'd use and why. So Bijan will have these questions posted, I think, once you get into the small group, right? But Bijan, can you quickly, in sort of lightning fashion, model what we're asking people to do? Yeah.
Sure. So I did go ahead and drop those in the chat for those who are like me and have a super short memory. And then I'll also be broadcasting it as well. So my name is Bijan. My pronouns are he, they interchangeably. I'm currently independent contracting, but recently transitioned out of restorative justice for Oakland Youth as a full-time restorative justice practitioner. And if I were to paint my ideal community, colors and textures, I think it would very much be bright colors, things that evoke happiness, probably some blues that would evoke water and flow and emotion. And the textures would be very much a combination of soft and rough and tactile, because I think that diversity is what makes a beautiful community. And so if I could think about just some beautiful patchwork in my community, I think that would be what my mural would look like. So does that make sense for everyone?
Yeah, great. Sounds great.
Sure.
I'm gonna start these breakout rooms, about 3 rooms, and folks will be just randomly assigned to a room.
Okay.
And so those are gonna be opening now.
Okay.
And once folks are in that room, I'll broadcast that message. All right, there we go. And Steve, I'm not sure if you're with us, but if you were having any issues getting into your room, just please let me know and we can support you.
Sorry, Bijan, I'm trying to just turn off the recording for a couple minutes. Just trying to think how to do that.
Got you. So if you go into the More tab, there's an option
that's
called
right.
the recording. It's about midway down on the option.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Challenge you to a lightning round. We did challenge you to a lightning round. I know it goes by very, very quickly, but hopefully folks got a chance to get a little bit better acquainted and get to know each other in the space a little bit more. I love that we have that opportunity to connect.
Bijan, can we just take a moment to breathe in all that we have experienced? I know we had a wonderful and intense lightning round discussion in our group. So can we just take a moment to breathe all of those experiences and feelings and sensations in right now? Okay. Great, thank you.
Awesome. And so next up, we have just an opportunity for folks to connect once again. So I want to invite folks to put one word or phrase in the chat and kind of light up that chat, get it going for just how that felt for you. Whether you want to say it felt good in my body, it made me laugh, honored, I see in the chat. You can say proud, excited, joyful, sleepy, whatever that looks like for you and your authentic self. Please go ahead and share that in the chat so we can get a sense. I know I'm still waking up this morning. I don't know about other folks. And I'm saying some really beautiful things like vulnerable, inclusive, joyful, energized, appreciating the beauty of others, peaceful, connected, present, hopeful. Thank you so much for these shares, folks. These are beautiful. And next up, I want to do, I think we should go ahead and transition into our guidelines that are kind of gonna hold us in this space. While we honor that there's no perfectly safe space, we want to do what we can to create a container, to create a safe enough space. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Fania, and I'm going to go ahead and put up the slide with our agreements, and we can get a quick consensus on that.
All right. All right, so these are just some more protocols than values. In a moment, we will talk about the values that we bring to this space. But before we do that, can we agree on 3 or 4 or 5 guidelines? Number 1, that we will show respect for everyone, and we will speak with respect and from the heart, and listen with respect and from the heart. And number two, be present as much as possible in the circle. Presencing individually and collective presencing is so important as we address trauma, the collective trauma of our culture. So staying in the circle, being present, taking care of yourself, however, if you got to do something, do that to take care of yourself. Number three, confidentiality. What is said in the circle, the details, the facts stays in the circle. However, we can share the lesson learned, but not necessarily the story, not the facts. Number four, though every voice is important and these circles, the talking piece sort of places a value on everyone's voice, and we need the wisdom of all voices, whether that of a 14-year-old child or a police chief in a city. Both of those voices are equally important. So we want to hear from everyone, although if you don't feel like speaking, that is fine. Invitation, not obligation. And last, take space, make space, or don't hog the space. And I don't, lawyers I know have a tendency to do that, but I don't think these lawyers. So make space for others to speak and make sure that your voice is heard as well. And can I get a thumbs up if these are okay with you, that you agree to these? And we're talking about consensus, not necessarily 100% agreement. If you can live with these, great. Looks like we're getting thumbs up. And if you can do a virtual thumbs up, or you can do your own thumb. Yeah, I think we've got consensus here. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It's so important to check in again to really create a container so that folks can show up authentically, right? There's not an expectation that everyone will have the same views or that we'll all agree, but that we can at least come together and meet each other at our humanity. So I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about that. Thank you, Fania. Next, I want us to move into a values round, and values are going to be pretty fun. Once again, I'm going to drop that link for our Jamboard, because you'll have an opportunity to actually put your personal values around our circle using that sticky note feature, and we'll be able to actually see what's happening in real time and what folks are adding to the circle space, right? So feel free to go ahead and add your name, if you would like, to your values, although that is not necessary, you don't have to. And I'll explain a little bit more after I share my screen. So moving back to this first centerpiece, again, if you are on the far left side of your screen and you go 1, 2, 3, 4 down and select the sticky note option, you'll have an opportunity to put a value around the center space. What we're looking for is a personal value. So what do you need to be able to show up authentically in this space? Something that you value, that you hope to show up in the space and hope to feel or see from others. That can look like that can look like joy, laughter, transparency, patience, love, justice. There is no limitation on what your personal value can be. When we're in groups of that are consistently coming back together, we may want to come to consensus around these values so that there's a sort of shared system of values in the space. But for the sake of today and for this kind of one-off meeting, we want to have an opportunity for folks to just really be able to name what's coming up for them. For folks who don't find the Jamboard accessible to them for whatever reason, also feel free to put your values in the chat and we'll be able to kind of review them from there. So I want to give folks just a few moments, and I want to invite Fania to add anything if I'm missing anything from this exercise.
No, I just wanted to say that if you go up in the chat, click on the chat and go up to the Jamboard link. If you click on that, then you'll get access to the Jamboard where you can write in your values.
Absolutely. We put it at the bottom of the chat twice again as well.
Oh, okay, great.
So I see that we have 5 people who are currently on and should be able to add.
Great.
Oh, someone says they only have read access. It should be, if you have the link, you can add. Oh, got it. Let me see. Edit. There we go. That updated link that I just dropped should give you access to it. I just dropped it in the chat. I apologize about that. And I see Stuart put love in the chat.
Who did that?
Stuart.
Okay.
Fania, I see you put fully present around the circle. I think I'll add mine. Great, I see folks are starting to be able to add to the Jamboard. That's beautiful. And as folks are kind of getting the opportunity to get onto that Jamboard and add to the chat, I'm wondering if we would just want to popcorn by maybe a raise of the hand, or even if you just want to unmute, if anyone wants to speak a little bit more deeply on their value in terms of why you chose it for this space in particular. I can model. Unapologetic authenticity is a value that I hold deep in my life, and I try to hold in all spaces. I identify as a queer Black person of color, and I definitely have very deep ties to the QTPOC, the queer and trans people of color community. And I do know that it's often difficult for folks to be transparent in those spaces, for them to be their full selves. There's this thing that I've had to do as a Black man called code switching in different spaces so that I can just be accepted and really be heard. But what's really important to me is to be able to come into all spaces and be my authentic self and still seen as a human being that is deserving of dignity. So that's why I always bring that to every space I come through, unapologetic authenticity. And I'm wondering if anyone else wants to speak on a value that's near and dear to them that they want to put into this space.
Maitreya? Is it Maitreya? Maitreya? I love your values. Do you mind just saying a few words about why you chose that?
Yeah, well, I'm so honored to be in a space. This particular kind of overlap of our professional world and these kind of personal values is like the most powerful thing for me. It is, I basically have been at the edge of tears since starting the slideshow, and I've just stayed that way. And so transparent is, I think, similar to authenticity, as Bijan said it, just to really be able to be myself. I'm so sensitive, and to be able to just be that in a professional conference and to have the kinds of conversations that we're having is so moving to me, and so just so wonderful and restoring of my soul. And then welcoming, I really want to do my part. Is kind of one of my gifts, to make people feel welcome, and wherever I can, if there's anybody, who feels awkward or whatever, I just want to put out there that I'm welcoming you, no matter what your views or how you're feeling in this space. And then connected. Yeah, that's probably my favorite thing about ClySlap is I feel a little bit like I stumbled into what was missing throughout my whole career, just in the last couple of years of finding out about this organization. It's all of the things I've ever cared about and that I've been exploring on my own in a professional organization. So feeling very moved. And kind of one last thing, it's funny, no matter what the commitment is, no matter if it's something I'm totally looking forward to or something I'm dreading, like a work commitment or whatever, I always will be a little bit like, oh, I wish I hadn't agreed to do that right beforehand. I'm too busy or whatever. And from the moment I logged on, it was like, it just washed through me with like, oh, this is exactly what I need to be doing today. There's literally nothing that would be a better use of my time. And that's just such a great reminder. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, that's it. I also wanted to name that typically if we were sitting in a restorative justice circle, we would have what are referred to as talking pieces, and you see that in the image on the centerpiece. And that's an image we would pass around the circle, so everyone who has the opportunity to speak when they have it, and your job is to be able to speak from the heart when you have the talking piece, and when you don't have it, to be able to listen deeply, right? And since we're in a virtual space, we want to definitely be able to highlight flexibility, right? So we are our own talking pieces in this space. Some folks may want to get a special object. I always keep a special object nearby, whether it's my lion or maybe some Palo Santo, whatever that looks like for you. If you want to hold your own personal talking piece, please feel free to do so in this space as we practice flexibility in this virtual capacity.
Wonderful, thank you. I see in the chat, I think we mentioned already, Stuart Webb put in love, and I added it to the Jamboard. Peter Gable, mutual presence. Deborah, love and presence. Lila, creativity. Yeah. So I think we see a number of overlaps and love, presence. Can you go back to a moment so we can quickly review and get a sense of the whole community's values? Yeah, authenticity, compassion, connection, vulnerability, accountability. Great. Okay. Thank you, Bijan.
Thank you.
Okay, should I just talk about this video as you cue it up, Bijan? So now we're going to go into a very brief video that is an introduction to restorative justice. It's only 3 minutes. Okay.
All right, folks, and there are closed captions available for folks who need to utilize that as well.
If crime hurts, then justice should heal. That's Fania Davis. It makes sense, right? Unfortunately, that's not what we're doing. In the US, there are 2.2 million people behind bars and nearly 5 million on probation and parole in a system of mass incarceration laden with racial injustices that disproportionately affect minority communities. 1 out of every 14 children has a parent in prison, destroying the health, stability, and resources of entire communities. This is the retributive justice system, and it operates on the theory that punishing people for crime makes them stop. It's hugely expensive, destructive to the human spirit, and worst of all, it doesn't work. Psychiatrist James Gilligan even calls it the most powerful stimulant of violence that we've yet discovered. People are looking for another system. Fortunately, there is one. It's called restorative justice. It focuses less on punishing the crime and more on holding people accountable in order to heal the harm. Restorative justice is based on who we really are. We're designed to live in community, to be of service to one another, and to nurture and repair our relationships. Where the retributive system asks, who did it, what rule was broken, and how do we punish them? Restorative justice asks, what is the harm? Who has been harmed? How do we repair it? Here's how it works. All the stakeholders get a chance to be heard in a facilitated process that balances the needs of victims, offenders, and the community. The person harmed explains how he or she was hurt. This itself is healing as it meets the need for acknowledgement, validation, and repair. The person who did the harm is held accountable in a new way. They're also given the opportunity to accept responsibility for their actions, which is also healing, share their perspectives, and to make amends for the harm they caused in the relationships that were broken. The whole community has a chance to address the underlying problems that gave rise to the situation, and then everyone works together to find a way to restore balance and offer healing to all stakeholders. In restorative and community justice, the concept of beloved community and living in right relationship is key. You're restoring justice and just relationships within the whole community. Does it work? Well, look at this. In the prison system, wherever restorative justice is tried, recidivism has plummeted. In schools, switching to restorative justice drops suspension, improving students' educational and social well-being while reducing bullying and other manifestations of violence. And it costs next to nothing by comparison. One teacher said, "Every time I use the retributive system, I lost a relationship. Every time I use this new system, I gain one." Restorative justice is justice that works, justice that transforms, justice that heals. Now that sounds like something we all want more of in our communities, so spread the word in yours.
Okay. All right. We're going to talk a little bit more about restorative justice fundamentals using a slideshow, which Bijan is going to put up in a second, and then we'll have an opportunity to hear from you. And then we'll show another, then we'll have a small discussion after that, right? Yeah. So we could get the PowerPoint up. I want to just reinforce some of the things that you heard in this introductory video. Let's start with a definition, as much as you can actually define restorative justice. It's a worldview and a set of values. Many people think of it solely as a conflict resolution measure, but in fact, it is a way of being present in the world in ways that bring more healing and wholeness, rather than in ways that bring more devastation, discord, and destruction. And one of the things I love so much about restorative justice is its rootedness in indigenous teachings. Restorative justice, of course, is also a theory of justice that emphasizes bringing together everyone that's inclusive, affected by wrongdoing, bring the community together, not just experts, not just professionals, justice professionals, bringing together everyone affected by harm to address their needs and obligations and to heal the harm as much as possible. Okay, next slide, please. So as the video suggested, our criminal justice system asks 3 questions: what rule was broken, who broke it, what punishment is deserved? So really, when you look at it, it's blaming, judging, and punishing. We blame and asking, what did you do? What rule did you break? We judge in terms of the adjudication process, and we punish. So our criminal justice system can be summed up in those 3 words. But restorative justice seeks to shift paradigms and flip the switch and ask who was harmed. So the focus is on healing that harm, of course, but who was harmed? Number 2, what are the needs and responsibilities that have been generated by that harm? Identify them. And third, how do we collectively identify these needs and responsibilities and figure out how to repair the harm? So our justice system, our criminal justice system, responds to harm with a second harm, and it exacerbates harm, it replicates harm, it reproduces harm, and adds to the already considerable and colossal energies of harm in the world. Next slide, please. I talked about the indigenous origins of restorative justice. So the restorative justice movement is only about 4 decades old, 4.5, I'd say now. Restorative justice is a contemporary expression of ancient reconciliation and conflict processes that were once universal to most societies. And it's especially an expression of ancient fundamental indigenous teachings and values that are enshrined in Ubuntu, which is a South African value that translated from the Zulu means I am because we are. It expresses that fundamental interconnectedness, that inherent interrelatedness, that is the structure of reality, as Dr. King has put it. So restorative justice is based on Mitakoye or Yasin. That's a misspelling, sorry about that. From the Lakota Sioux tradition. You've heard that. We are family, all my relatives, all my relations. We are all family, human and beyond human. And we're here to learn to nurture and take care of one another and take care of our relationships. In Lakesh is the Mayan expression of this value. You are my other eye. When I look at you, I see me. And when you look at me, you see you. In Lakesh, Mayan. In this important and fundamental and generative sense, restorative justice is not just a technique, it's not just a conflict resolution protocol, it is a worldview, it's a way of life. And I don't mean to diminish its value as a conflict resolution process by any means, I'm only wanting to expand it. Okay, next slide, please. So I talked about how restorative justice invites a paradigm shift in the way that we think about and do justice. It challenges the fundamental assumptions in the dominant discourse about justice in our culture. And in that sense, it's different from mediation, maybe it's more akin to transformative mediation. It's different from arbitration. It's different from community panels. It's different from community service. It's different from all of these other alternatives to alternative dispute resolution processes. In some ways, it's more subversive because it goes to the heart of what justice is and challenges our ideas about justice as a retributive process, as an inherently harmful process. Okay, next slide, please. Many people ask, what's the difference? Is there any difference between restorative justice and transformative justice? Many people have the notion that restorative justice is not transformative because it seeks to go back, to the anti-status quo. And critics say, we don't want to go back because that's an unjust status quo. We want to transform. And so restorative justice is not transformative, it is said, but that's a very sort of, I believe, reductionist understanding of what restorative justice is. You could say that the word restorative is really referring to restoring that inherent spark of divinity that resides in all of us, that has been covered over and covered up and absenced by our culture, that is a culture and fundamentally of harm, that is a culture of domination, that is a culture of extreme individualism. So when we use the word restorative, we're really talking about restoring that inherent goodness that that lives within all human beings. And so I can say, though, that transformative justice is different from restorative justice in some ways, in the sense that transformative justice practitioners typically do not do programs or work with the state. They prefer community-based work. They don't typically partner with justice systems, with school systems. They don't usually work in those spaces and inside of those systems of domination. And as a matter of principle, they prefer to work outside. Now, restorative justice, we do both. We work inside systems and we work in communities. And it's important when we do work inside systems, it's so important for those programs that are within schools, for example, to be community-based. It's so important for those programs not to be dominated by systems, these systems that have been the source of historical oppression in the first place. So having a strong community input and leadership, and having programs that are not systems dominated, even as we partner with systems, is an important value. Next, Bijan. Is that the last one on this part? Let's see.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay, so from here, should we have a little discussion, Bijan? I know we're running behind a bit. And I should say here that unfortunately I have to leave early. I have a speaking engagement at 10 o'clock in Brazil. So I'll be leaving a little bit before 10. Okay. Bijan?
Absolutely. I think we've covered a lot. We've had a video. And so I'm wondering if we want to just also encouraging folks to use that parking lot. But I'm wondering if folks just want to do some outward processing and kind of just popcorn on some of the thoughts that they had on some of the things that came up, what resonated with you, maybe questions that may have arisen. Perhaps we can have a moment or two just to reflect. How does that sound to everyone?
Okay, it looks like Peter has his hand up.
That's appropriate. I haven't quite got the tech pieces of, but I do have a question, which is, Fania, I just wanted you to, do you mind speaking a little more on involving the community rather than falling back into the systems we already have? You were talking about schools right before that, and I was wondering how that looks.
Okay, so very briefly, you can have a program that is initiated by, say, by a top-down process, say by the Board of Education. We want to introduce restorative justice to our schools. So we're going to mandate restorative. First of all, that's the problem there, because restorative justice is about doing with and not doing to. And it's also a problem because it's going to bring all the values of hierarchy, of extreme individualism that comes from that system, and school systems in many ways are systems of, or they participate in systems of domination. We see racial disparities in exclusionary discipline. Far more children of color are arrested, for often engaging in simple in adolescent behavior. We see little Black boys at the age of 6 being escorted by police from their class in handcuffs because they've had a temper tantrum. And of course, that's a school to prison pipeline. So schools are in many ways participate in the historical domination that we have seen. And so ideally, it would be a community organization and perhaps students who say, we want to have a restorative justice program, and what do you think about it? And ideally, the locus of that effort will come initially from community and not from systems. Like in Oakland, what we did with Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth, if you look around the nation, you see that restorative justice programs are either started by schools, by principals in a top-down way, by boards, or in association with, an alliance with, in partnership with communities. And once the program gets started, say in Oakland, all of the work was being done by community group, Restorative Justice or Oakland Youth, in the first couple of years. But after, I think, the second or third year, the school board passed a resolution with student organizing, adopting restorative justice as official school policy. So we got money from schools, we got schools hiring staff. And I think the way that we sort of push back on pressures of co-optation is to keep that lifeline to the community really strong and to be very clear about our values of non-hierarchical approaches and community-based approaches, and centering the voices of those most negatively impacted. So the importance of holding close out to our values, and having a very strong and vibrant and alive connection with community groups. So ideally, these are not systems-dominated programs, but these are community-led programs in partnership with systems.
Thank you. Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for that question. I do want to hold us accountable to our time restraints, although if anyone knows me, I always saying time is not real, but today it is. It's a social construct. But I do see one more question from Malay in the chat, Fania, that you may want to address around restorative justice being used in domestic violence matters. And then we need to move into a video where you all will actually see a restorative justice circle in action.
Yeah. And thanks for that question. I have not personally done restorative justice to address domestic violence, but there is a movement, a sort of stream, a powerful stream within the restorative justice movement that is addressing domestic violence. And if I can remember names, Donna Coker, Linda Mills, are doing research and working with programs. There's a great program in Texas. I don't know about it now, but some years ago it got started. I visited it, and that was a program that addressed domestic violence. It was a program within the justice system, which was started by a judge, which brought up all of my concerns about systems domination. So that's a problem. And I should say that program apparently has been quite successful in addressing domestic violence in non-carceral ways. And that's really important, because especially women of color who are very often victimized by their partners, often men, don't want to call the police, because they know that once they bring the police into this private matter, that folks can be killed, their loved ones can be killed. So developing non-carceral approaches to domestic violence is really important. It's important in abolitionist communities. It's important in transformative justice communities. So it's of course it's very complicated. It can be risky to bring together a person who has caused harm to their partner with the person who has been harmed, especially when there has been a long-term chronic relationship of violence there and imbalance of power. I say that, yet I also say that really good work has been done. Andrea Ritchie, Linda Mills, and Donna Koch are the names that I think of who are leading this work. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Fania. In addition to that, if I may add as well, 3 years back, Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth actually held a convening regarding sexual harm at the intersection of restorative justice. And so if you wanted to reach out to the organization, also I know the RJOY website was dropped in the chat. You can definitely seek them out for more information. There's a lot of really beautiful and really informative sessions around restorative justice and spirituality. They also talked about, they did touch on domestic violence, We also touched on the root of sexual harm and how to address, right, and where it comes from. There was a lot touching on the power, privilege, and oppression of sexual harm and domestic harm and in romantic relationships. So I would encourage folks to definitely reach out to Restorative Justice, RJOY, as a resource for more information. And with that, Fania, did you want to go ahead and introduce the Met West video and what folks will be seeing?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to sort of throw this out to the group for a moment. We are a bit behind, and we can go to another video which actually demonstrates a circle process. Would you like to do that? Yeah. Okay, great. Then let's do it. So this is a video of a real circle that RJOY produced a few years ago. That is facilitated by a young person.
They come in, they're giggling, they're laughing. And there's just like a lot of kind of like giddy, intense energy.
Coming from what?
And then the circle and their relationships with each other actually kind of like quiet something in them and allow them to be more present for each other.
When we do circles here, before we do the circles, we sit down and like plan the opening ceremony. My great hope is to laugh as much as I cry, to get my work done and try to love someone. And I have enough courage to accept the love in return. Maya Angelou. And in high school especially, like, we don't have enough, connections with each other sometimes, everybody just all focused on the work and, stress at home and stuff like that. And circles create a space where people could talk about their feelings, about how they're doing home life. Now we will review our class values. The first one was being open.
The other one is respect.
We share our values to respect each other and stuff like that, because we all are still humans and people get sensitive sometimes. So we're trying to make sure that everybody feels comfortable and doesn't get their feelings hurt. Okay, now we will share an object that relates to hope.
I have my I Heart Being Black bracelet because I hope that everybody is proud of who they are.
I got this play to win thing from a boyfriend. We exchange bands all the time, and this brings hope because it just keeps me going.
My mom made this necklace for me, and it represents hope because she never had time to do anything for herself. They're being asked to be vulnerable to a group of people, which is kind of like antithetical to what it's like to be a teenager, which is what's the best way to hide right now. So the first thing that I do is I share as deeply as I possibly can. I feel like if I can share deeply and from my heart and listen really attentively to other students, they're looking at me to see how I'm behaving.
I have you guys give me a lot of hope and stuff like that. Our advisory is like a family. I've been through police brutality, tragedies and stuff like that. And instead of me being depressed about life, I know I can come in and talk to my community. They understand, and most of the time, if it's something I'm going through, they've probably already been through it before.
People act like they shy and stuff like that, and like the icebreaker loosens and, everybody up, we all get in a good mood and then we're ready to talk.
The wind comes and blows if you live in Oakland.
The wind comes and takes anyone whose shirt is black.
The wind comes and takes anyone that likes to play basketball.
Anybody who has headphones.
Anybody that lives in East Oakland. If you're wearing shorts.
The wind comes and
blows if
you have on a pink shirt.
I picked this talking piece. This show is hard, and we're a strong community.
It's kind of like step up, step back, because, I am stepping up by, putting myself out there and being a facilitator. But I'm also like stepping back because I'm letting other people talk as well.
What's good about being a teenager?
You get more freedom now.
You get to know people really deeply.
If you look back on your childhood, you realize that there's certain things that you couldn't do when you were that age.
You get the taste of being an adult.
Man.
So, yeah, you're like...
I mean, I find it balanced to be serious and be funny. If we're saying something that's, you know, sad, that just changes the whole direction of the circle. So, I mean, eventually somebody has to say something to make the circle, you know, bring back to life, because if it's sad, nobody's going to want to talk again.
And sort of like letting the circle alternate between serious and light. We can laugh in certain moments. We can allow this to become lighter so that we also stay more resilient in the circle. And laughing with them is really important. And it also shows I respect all of who they are.
What's hard about being a teenager?
Sometimes you just want to do stuff that you think you're ready for, but then when really you're not, and you just want to grow up too fast sometimes.
When you're a child, you know how you're always so happy and stuff like that. Now you're a teenager and you know what stuff's happening in the world and like you feel sadder. I don't remember being happy. Like the closest time I remember that was when I was like 6, so. The one thing I hate about being a teenager is like you can't be as happy as you were as a kid.
I remember really wanting to leave home from really the time I started high school. I had to just like sit with it and wait until I was old enough to leave the house, even though I wasn't necessarily ready.
Well, I have more responsibilities now. Take care of my little brother and family members and everything, so it's really harder now.
You have to learn how to say things without getting in trouble, or like the right way how to say it without like getting an attitude. Before I came to Midwest, I didn't have no self-control. Like in class, I was the class clown. Like, and I never listened to my teachers. Getting suspended, I never cared. And every time I got a phone call home, I used to lie and say, "She lying. I never did that." When I'm in a circle, I feel opened up. The circles is a part of me treating people better because I see how people are when people open up, and I see how they're treated, and I know I wouldn't want nobody to treat me like that.
They come into the room with 9 years of experience of this is what kind of student I am. And I just think that's the power of a circle. You are exactly who you are as you are in relationships with your peers. Someone who she doesn't get to be most of the time.
You can control yourself. You don't need nobody to tell you to stop. You know if you right or wrong.
If you could change one thing about being a teenager, what would it be?
Everyone should have a mentor, not only about your schoolwork, but like what goes on in your house.
They're wondering why teenagers are like becoming more and more obese, and it's because they don't feed us healthier foods.
School should be more interactive because the best way to learn is hands-on.
They still see us like we're little kids, but they don't know what's going on in our minds. They don't know if we're maturing.
What are the things teenagers can do to make a difference in their lives or others?
Think about things twice before you do anything. That was my lesson learned. Because if I would have thought about it the second time, I've probably never been in the trouble I'm in.
Don't be so negative. Once you're negative around people, like people get negative too. If you're positive, then everybody around you going to be more positive, even if they're around like their household is negative.
Her ability to build relationships with her peers, to allow me to know her more deeply, to allow other people to help harness her energy of this is the kind of student I am, I think it's allowed her to stay here.
So we're gonna do the closing ceremony. Cause you have an opening one, so why not have a closing one? I mean, you know, like you have to close it out with something good. This little basket is gonna go around. Everybody will pick a name, and then you say appreciation.
I want to appreciate Alfredo, cause you're hella nice.
I appreciate Matthew. You're a good friend, and I know I can trust you with stuff.
I want to appreciate you because you're really nice and you're really fun to hang out with, and you did a good job leading this.
I appreciate Sarah because this whole week and last week, Sarah's just been making me laugh, and like she just got a good attitude, and she's like so helpful. She helps me whenever I need help. I see her like a sister.
I want to appreciate Pancho for staying strong after going through a lot and having to wear that and being under house arrest and not being able to go out.
I want to appreciate you because on everything you do, you always give it like 120%,
Like you really just express yourself in everything you do, and yeah, best friend.
Everybody clap for Kalia and Jennifer and yourselves. Yeah.
All right. Welcome back into the space, everyone. Now we're going to get into a quick PowerPoint, just kind of going over some of the elements of circle. A little bit review. We're going to go through it rather quickly. Fania, I'm just going to put those up on screen now, but do you want to add anything before we move to make that transition?
No, not right now. Thank you. And do any of you in the room want to just say one word about how you're feeling? I mean, that video really shifted our space, right? It sort of reconfigured. It feels different now being together, right? After experiencing that video. Any word that you want to just, speak into the room? Just one word about what's coming up for you right now after having witnessed that video. Just popcorn, you can call it out or put it in the chat.
I think for me, kind of compassion, just feeling their vulnerability, They're closer to it, I think, being younger and yeah, just feeling compassion.
I'll say inspired.
Okay.
Just one word. But, very inspiring.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Okay. We like to sort of create spaces instead of jumping from one thing into the next. Just take a moment to absorb and ingest, the sensations, the feelings, the thoughts of what we just experienced before so quickly moving on to something else. So thank you for that little interlude of silence. We are trying to get the PowerPoint up, right, Bijan? Are we good?
Yes. Are folks able to see it? No.
No, we can't. No, we're just seeing the gallery.
Let me share again. I'm not sure why that is.
Okay.
Is that better?
Now we see. Yeah. Okay.
There we are. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Getting into the circle process, what we just witnessed is one of peacemaking, one of 3 basic restorative justice models, which we refer to as peacemaking circles. Other models include restorative conferencing, as well as victim-offender dialogue. So, or relational elements of circles, right? So there's the first element, which is meeting and getting acquainted, which really does take just about half of the circle space. A lot of that looks like doing exercises like the icebreakers, like breathing, opening up in ceremony, honoring the land, honoring one another and who all is in the space. Folks often get a little bit tripped up about the time that it takes to be able to implement just this first half, which is meeting and getting acquainted, but it's so key to this second element, which is trust building. If you're in a space and you're not feeling comfortable, you're not aware of your environment or who's in the space, it is then hard to ask folks to come in, to be able to show up and be vulnerable and be their authentic selves and speak truth into the space without feeling that they have the safety and the comfort to do so, right? So really critical that you're spending really about half of your time actually meeting, getting acquainted, and trust building through exercises like games, like icebreakers, like activities that allow us to learn more about one another in space. The second half has to do with the issues, right? So what does it mean to be able to ask questions of the group around whatever the particular topic or issue is, and then to really be able to end in a space of solution, right? What are the community-led solutions that we come up with and with consensus that really speaks to a lot of the issues that that for the reasons that may have brought us together, right? So again, just in review, the meeting, getting acquainted, trust building, addressing of issues or topics, and really coming out with a community-based plan through solutions.
And if I could just quickly add here, in the Western world, we want to just be all about business. Let's get to whatever we're here to talk about. But restorative justice is a relational justice, and so we try to be as relational as possible in our interactions with one another, whether it's in the context of a conflict circle, a peace building circle, or community building circle. Before we get to the tough issues, it's important to establish trust, as was said, and a sense of presence, mutual presence, as Peter was saying earlier. So we take the time to do that rather than going straight to the issues at hand. Great.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Our next slide talks about the 5 elements of circle, and they did a really great job of outlining it in the video, so this will be much review. So A is the circle keeper, the holder of space, right? Although they are holding the space, they may be introducing and moving us from one portion of the circle to the next. They are also an active community member and participant in the space. So they're not just coming in and they're not playing referee, they're not monitoring, they're not even necessarily in charge of the space, right? We have this saying in restorative justice spaces, the circle runs itself, right? The community is going to be able to hold that space. And as a circle keeper, one of the most difficult things to do is to be able to sit on your hands and allow there to be tension, allow there to be growth, allow there to be humanity, allow there to be laughter and levity, right? All of those things will show up in the space. And using those tools of like values and guidelines, again, that's setting up that safe enough container for folks to be able to show up and hold all of those things, right? We talked a little bit earlier about the talking piece and the centerpiece. To go a little bit more in depth on the centerpiece, it's what you see in what you saw in the middle of the circle, and you can still view if you're viewing the jam board, right? And so it's something that we do again to ground us in the space. Often you'll see it set up and referred to as an altar or a centerpiece. It'll have elements of earth, air, fire, and water, right? Those things that connect us to the earth, connect us to one another. And then you'll often see talking pieces. You may see things that are of great value to a particular group or a particular person in that space. Next, again, are those values and guidelines, right? To really be able to hold that container so that if conflict were to come up, that we would be able to navigate it with as little harm as possible, right? So really understanding about folks' values on a deeper level, really setting some community guidelines so that we know how to be with one another without offending, right? As we're learning one another. Number 4 is ceremony, which a circle space will always open and begin with. This can look like any form of artwork, right? So it can look like a painting, and viewing that painting, it can be music, it can be meditation, it can be guided breathing, right? Anything that's going to really set the tone for the space that we're gonna hold for in that moment and that set time. And number 5 is absolutely critical, and it is to have consensus, right? It is a community-led process, not to be run by a few or one single person, but for really everyone to have the opportunity to speak into the space. Often we realize in society, we're kind of born into a world with rules and regulations and expectations and constructs, right? It's really critical in a restorative space that you have opportunity to build that community in an authentic way, right there in the moment, right? So you have a say in how that space is ran. You have a say in the rules and guidelines and values that you hold in that space, and you are able to come to a consensus. And everyone doesn't always have to agree perfectly, right? But again, as Fania said earlier in the day, these are things that you can live with, right? And these are always values and guidelines are always living, breathing documents. They can change at any given time. They're not written in stone, right? So they can always be revisited. And we actually encourage that you go back and revisit those time and time again. So you may find that those values and guidelines will change as the dynamics of the group change, as the group grows, as the group gets to know each other, right?
And if I could just insert here the whole notion that consensus, of course, is different from majority rule, which is the way that we are accustomed to and are conditioned to make decisions. Everyone owns the plan or whatever the decision is, not simply the majority. Okay.
Absolutely, that's important. Thank you, Fania.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so here I just want to emphasize, and I don't think we can overemphasize the centrality of the importance of creating these healing spaces wherever we are, whether in our families, in our workplaces, in our communities, in our organizations, these spaces of deep connectivity and deep community and resonance, the we spaces, spaces of mutual presence, spaces of collective presencing, where we feel heard, we feel seen, we feel a sense of belonging. These kinds of spaces, as we co-created them in Oakland schools, led to so much transformation and trauma healing, especially for our youth. I think, we as a nation are a traumatized nation. We are a traumagenic nation. We were born into multiple compound, colossal trauma, the traumas of slavery, the slave trade, of genocide, of land theft, of racial capitalism, of heteropatriarchy. We are a culture, our culture rather, is a towering monument to harm, is a massive generator of harm. So it's so important for us to create these healing spaces if we are to move into a future, if we're going to stop the perpetual reenactment of these traumas that we never really processed and healed for 400 years. So spaces of radical respect, of radical relationality, of radical responsibility. And we have used the peacemaking circle process in restorative justice to co-create these spaces. And another point I wanted to make about the importance of these spaces is that we get to sort of create these liberated zones, these spaces of the future, so that the future becomes now when we embody, these values of the future. And we get to augment the old movement query, which is, what do I do to create transformation? And ask but also ask, who shall I be to create a new world? So embodying that new future, embodying the values of the future. And the whole point is that if we have enough of these spaces all over the world, we will reach a tipping point, hopefully a critical mass, where we can have transformation and new norms and patterns will emerge. Okay.
And again, this slide is just expounding more on the talking piece and the centerpiece, which we've covered a little bit earlier. I think we can just move past this one, Fania, if you didn't have anything additional to add.
I don't. Well, actually, Yeah, just calling your attention to this second paragraph here. The centerpiece reminds us that there are no sides. And of course, in adversarial justice, that's the heart of our justice system. That binary, oppositional, combative, good, bad, right, wrong, guilty, innocent. It's fundamentally and thoroughly oppositional. And restorative justice, again, seeks to shift that. And so the centerpiece reminds us there are no sides. There is only the center. And that center is how do we create healing? How do we create accountability? Yeah.
And again, this is a review on the values and guidelines, really wanting to call folks attention to this image here, right? These young boys sitting in circle and connecting with one another in that space, right? So again, those values, a values-driven process allows folks to understand personal values and also agree on shared values, right? It offers an opportunity for us to come forward as our best selves, right? To present our best selves and to see others in their best, in the form of their best selves. And again, just more on ceremony, which again can be a poem, a quote, a song, guided meditation, a breathing exercise. One of the things I love about this paragraph is it talks about a sacred space. And I think that's something that we don't talk about enough, right? The importance of having sacred space and creating sacred space, right? That is that space where folks can share deeply, can be in space with one another, in a space where people can honor themselves, mind, body, and spirit, right? And so it's important that we have these safe spaces, these healing-centered spaces, so that we can continue to move forward in holistic ways. And I think that's our last slide there.
Thank you, Bijan. Shall we go into small groups again to reflect on what has been said?
Absolutely. We've covered quite a bit at this point, and so I want to create an opportunity for folks to get back into those smaller groups of maybe 2 to 3. Fania, if that sounds good. And then I also want to kind of double up and encourage folks to kind of be attentive to their bodies. We've been sitting in the space on our screens for quite a while. So if we can also pay attention to movement, right? If in our groups as we're speaking, we can move our shoulders, we can roll our necks, we can take out our hands, you can stand as you're able, right? To really be attentive to your body as you're engaging in this process.
Thank you, Bijan. Yeah.
All right, and just as a processing space, again, we're gonna popcorn thoughts, ideas, and experiences. And I also wanna invite folks to really talk about where you see circles and restorative healing spaces being useful in your life, right? Whether that's in a workspace, whether that's in a space with your family and friends or in your personal life, where do you see these spaces being most useful in your life? I'm going to go ahead and open those rooms.
Bijan, just one moment, if you don't mind. I'm going to say farewell here. I may go into the small group just for a few minutes, but I won't be able to come back to see all your beautiful faces all together again. So I just wanted to say thank you. It's been an honor being here and seeing old friends again. And just wish you the best in your work in the world, the work of justice and the work of healing. Thank you.
Thank you, Fania.
Okay.
Thank you, Fania. And bring the message to Brazil, please.
Okay, I'll do my best. Thank you.
Let's see, our rooms are filling up.
It says 2 unassigned participants. Bijan.
I got those. And so Lindsay has been assigned a room and Tyler has been assigned a room. Okay. Lindsay, if you're having any difficulty at all getting into your room, please just let us know and we can support you best we can.
Was Lindsay not in our room, or?
They are. They're in our room.
It's me and Tyler.
They were supposed to be an additional room, but that's okay. We can just have this.
No, this is a good room.
All right, so I'm just gonna broadcast that message to the group. Oh, got it. Lindsay's just listening today. Thank you so much for letting us know. I'm able to speak. I'm just gonna send out that broadcast. Where do you see? All right. I'm gonna drop it in the chat as well.
Not Tyler. I'm Nanette. It's me.
All right. And so, Nanette, did you want to maybe start us off by addressing this question of where you see RJ circles and healing spaces being most useful in your life?
Sure. That was a wonderful video. I had actually seen an RJoy video a number of years ago of a restorative circle, somebody a student re-entering after suspension, but I'd never actually seen just sort of a straight kind of peacemaking circle. And I feel like that could have a lot of potential in so many contexts. I mean, one thing that I'm working on right now is this movement called Healing Centered Schools. And it's a movement in New York City to bring healing principles on multiple levels into the public school system. And the group, the Healing Centered Schools group, has come up with a roadmap and sort of guidelines on how to do, on what the guiding principles should be for healing. Oh, I just realized I didn't pause the recording. Just a second. Sorry.
All good, all good. So we want to actually move into a bit of a ceremonial closing. And then I want to be able to pass it off to Peter and Nanette so that they can have, if they have any final thoughts. But before we do that, I just wanted to have an opportunity to really express my gratitude for you all allowing Fania and I into this space to share with you this practice of restorative justice. We didn't get to everything that we had hoped to today, but we did cover quite a bit. And while this isn't a full training, we're just happy to have given you just a little bit, just enough for you to take into your personal lives, for you to follow up on those resources, and for you to continue to connect with one another. We have something at Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth we like to call communities of practice. And so I want to encourage folks to stay connected, stay in your community of practice. And I want to be able to end, just as we started in ceremony with that slideshow, I want to be able to end in ceremony with a brief meditation. And that's going to be a visual of some water with a really beautiful JNS meditation by Maya Angelou. And before we get there, I just want to pass it to Peter and Nanette, because you may want to have some final closing thoughts before we just kind of close out in ceremony.
Just thank you to Bijan and Fania. I must say I'm elated at the moment. My spirit has steadily been rising like a, I don't know, like Atlantis out of the ocean. And I really feel quite uplifted at the moment, imagining liberated spaces like this spreading across the culture, which I do believe is possible. So thank you for that. And I would say to everyone here, please come tomorrow to the next intensive on bringing a spiritual dimension to law practice, where you will hear about the amazing Georgia Justice Project in Atlanta, which has, I'll just say one thing, takes clients on for life, permanently. And really, it's just a great place. I've seen the beauty of its work. So you'll hear about that tomorrow at 11 o'clock East Coast time. Nanette, do you want to say anything if you're there?
Here, just great thank you to Bijan and Fania, that she's left for Brazil, and wonderful to be with everyone. And please join us tomorrow. I appreciate everyone sharing.
Thank you. And without further ado, I want to invite folks to just get comfortable in the space. I know we're just over time, so maybe we'll just do about 2 minutes or so, but just to get comfortable in your space, ground yourselves, really focusing in on your body and clearing your thoughts, grounding in your spirit, to kind of carry you through the rest of your day. And I'm going to actually start a visualizer and a brief meditation.
Amazed at it and grateful for it. What I prayed for is humility, to know that there's something greater than I. I am a human being. Nothing human can be alien to me. I intend to use my energies constructively as opposed to destructively. If you can do that about the negative, just think what you can do about the positive. If a human being dreams a great dream, dares to love somebody, if a human being dares to be Martin King or Mother Teresa or Malcolm X, if a human being dares to be bigger than the condition into which she or he was born, it means so can you. And so you can try to stretch yourself.
I know that was super brief, but I do want to be respectful of folks' time. Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude. If you wish to reach out to myself, I'm actually going to drop my email in the chat. Folks, please don't be a stranger. And with that, you all have an excellent rest of your day.
Thank you so much.